Yes,
He's just
okay.
trying to be disciplined.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Leela Rice. I'm the Senior Director of Development for the School of Engineering, and I have the pleasure of working very closely with Dr. Kaplan. Welcome back to campus. We're all glad you're here. I hope this room doesn't cause any bad memories or thoughts of things, but I hope you'll enjoy the conversation. I'm just going to turn the floor over to David because I know you would rather hear from him. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I always love talking to alums, so thanks for trekking yourself in this morning despite the rain and everything. I really appreciate you taking the time. We'll spend about an hour together. I'm happy to chat afterwards if you have other questions, and please, surprise, look at this. Anyway, oh, thanks. So today I figured I'd pick a topic. Those of you who know the lab well, you know we do way too many things because my mind is always on way too many things. But today I wanted to just talk about something everyone can relate to, and that's food, right? So hopefully everyone likes food, right? This is your quiz this morning. Yes, raise your hand. Okay, anybody not like food? All right, so we're good, right? Okay, so the real question for today is, do you care about eating healthier food? Yes? Yes? Anybody not want healthier food? So this is way too easy for a class. Okay, so if you want healthier food, what are your options today, right? You can go to Whole Foods and look for healthy food there. And can you find healthy food there? Sometimes, yeah, pretty good stuff. Sometimes you pay a lot more money and sometimes you don't, right? But you can do somewhat well looking for better foods, and we can talk about what those are in a minute, right? What are your other options? Anything else you can think of?
Grow it on your own.
Grow it on your own, excellent, good. So if you have the time, the land and everything else, you could certainly grow it on your own. So that's great for some people, but probably not great for the majority of us, right? And so what I really wanted to talk about today is this world of what we call cellular agriculture, right? Which is the best of everything you could think of in the future of healthy eating. That's the way I describe it, right? So if you want to think about how are you going to get better nutrition, better even therapeutic help, as well as just better stuff for you regardless, then this is your place. You came to the right lecture or chat today. And if it's not something you want, you're welcome to leave anytime, okay? And I would also add that I think many of you probably heard the term, probably overused, we call it personalized medicine, right? Personalized medicine is meaning what do you specifically need at this stage of your life and whatever your activities are that's going to help you perform the best you can perform, right? So our message today, if there's one take-home message, the future of eating is personalized food. And I mean that in the best sense, not just you have three choices if you're young, medium, and old. This is what you eat at the supermarket, bring it home and cook it. I mean, literally looking at your genome, your proteome, your metabolome. So what makes up your being and what you're busy trying to do. Maybe you're an athlete, maybe you're having a kid, maybe you're in a nursing home, whatever it is, and then tailoring what you eat to give you the best opportunities. And the way I describe it, and I meant to put a graph in there and I just didn't have time this morning. If you look at our lifespan in the US particularly today, right? You grow and you get to the certain age and you reach, you know, I don't know what it is these days, somewhere between 75 and 85 if you're male or female and so on is your maximum estimated lifespan. My belief, and again, this is me thinking these things, right? If we do our job well, what we're going to talk about this morning, that curve should go way up, right? Because we don't realize what we're limiting our own physiology, health, and well-being because of what we eat today. And we just don't know how to manage that well, but we can do so much better with what I'm talking about here. So that's the promise for today. Anybody not excited about this yet? Anybody? Okay, good. So let's try that. So if you're not aware of this field, it's simply removing livestock and animals from the equation of making food, but keeping all the good parts, right? So the only thing we ever need from an animal are the cells of the animal. We don't harm the animal in the process. It's a very simple tissue biopsy. We do this out at the School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts in Grafton. So I don't know if there are any former vet folks here. And then the animal goes off on its well-being. If we do our job really, really well, we never need that animal again. So it's a one-time pinprick, and then we're done, right? So that's kind of the premise here. So I call it farming without animals. So it's really growing protein-rich foods and not needing to grow livestock and so on. And we'll get into why we think that's important for many, many reasons. And that's why many different kinds of students from different backgrounds at Tufts are very passionate about what I'm talking about today. But it starts, in my mind, with nutrition, health, better eating, and better food, okay? So those of you, again, who know my lab, we have spent a decade studying the field of tissue engineering. So we started out 25 years ago growing human cells. Some of you did some of this in our lab, I believe. And mostly that's human stem cells. We learned how to culture them, grow them, differentiate them into tissue types, grow tissues. We actually have spin-out companies out there in the Boston area that use this technology for different things today. So we had a long history of how to combine the right cell type with the right kind of housing or matrix and the right conditions to get the right tissue outcome from that process. It's the same exact thing in growing food, right? We need the right animal cell. We need the right factors to get those cells to grow and thrive. And then we need the right sort of environment. We call that the bioreactor, and the texture from biomaterials to get the right outcome. But if I put up human tissues on one side and growing food from tissue engineering on the other side, what are the differences? Some of you know this field. Anybody? What's different about the two? Completely different. Anyone?
Ethics.
Say again?
Ethics.
Ethics for sure. But let's forget the ethics. Let's talk about science and engineering. Ethics, well, we can talk about ethics all day here for sure, but let's focus on the technology itself, right? So if you think about the two things, if you have liver failure, right, or you need a bone graft, you go into the doctor's office, you figure it out, you go to the ER. What's the last thing on your mind at that point? The cost, right? You just want to feel better. You don't care about the cost. You do, but your insurance, if you have insurance, pays for that, right? With food, that completely is 180 degrees. If the cost isn't competitive with what you're used to buying today, it's never going to go, right? So that's number one. And what's the other amazing difference here?
The structure of like if you put it into your own body, it has to work. And if you just eat it, doesn't have to be like very well.
It doesn't have to be as refined. Let's put it that way. That's a great way to say it. Yeah. So one you're going to eat, one you're just going to put in the body or on the body, right? So fair enough, right? And then the last part is if you follow the ethics of this, leaving animals out of the equation, you can't use any animal-derived ingredients in the entire process of growing food, right? And so when we grow cells for medicine, we use serum from animals. We use growth factors that can come from animals. We use lots of stuff from animals. They're costly and they're animal derived. All that goes away. So what does that mean? We have to rethink everything when we grow food, even still using the principles of tissue engineering from human medicine, but now just kind of redoing all the equations in ways we never had to before. One, cost, and no animal ingredients. Okay, so far, you with me? Okay, any questions yet? Please shout out questions anytime. No? Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, so this is kind of the vision for the future. This is not my slide. I got it from somebody else, right? But how do you produce animal products, meat, seafood, milk, eggs, blah, 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 by, we'll call it the meat breweries of the future, right? Kind of the big, just to get you the sense, right? And this is really what we're talking about today, right? So this is the kind of standard cartoon. If you go left to right, this is your primer for what we'll talk about. So stick with me, right? Left to right, you pick your favorite animal. This is a cow. If you're a Tufts alum, you'd probably pick an elephant, right? Okay. And then we isolate stem cells, usually from muscle tissue or fat tissue. That's that simple biopsy, okay? And then the animal's gone from anything else we're going to talk about. And then we go over in the middle there and you're going to grow lots of cells, right? How many cells? More cells than you can ever count, right? Because food is massive, right? It's not like a small medical tissue. So you've got to scale up the amount of cells by just orders of magnitude that no one has ever had to deal with before. And if you do that well, then you pick your favorite, we call it scaffolding on the right-hand side. So think about things that are going to give food texture and shape. So you pick those materials the right way, and then you add your cells to those scaffolds, and then you make products on the right-hand side. And then you go home and pray that somebody will buy them, right? That's kind of the goal, right? And so that's kind of the whole paradigm for cellular agriculture, taking cells from animals, no other animal ingredients, and making these products on the right. Now, I could spend all day on this slide because everything I just said is correct, but there's nuances to everything, so stick with me on that. For example, all the companies, there's about 200 startup companies or established companies worldwide in this field today. Either they're supplying products to grow these cells and so on, or they're startups that are actually making these products. So we'll get into some of that if we have time. All of them decided that they want to do what you see on the right. Make products that all of you are familiar with, right? So that's a debatable equation, right? And their thinking was, let's make something everyone knows and loves, so all we have to do is make the same thing and they'll want to buy it. Now, I personally think that's wrong, because I don't think, why would you buy something new and different if you don't know much about it and you're happy with what you have already? So my argument is that's not enough to do the job. The enough is what we started talking about this afternoon or this morning, right? It's elevating the nutrition, elevating maybe the taste, elevating the quality of what you're going to consume. So it's not just making the product you're familiar with, but making it something you're going to go and want to try because it's going to be unique. Let me give you one quick example. We have one of our most recent spin-offs, one of the companies out of the lab technology is called Ethos Enhanced Foods. And that's about growing cow cells. So if this works, cow cells over here. And we really are focused on the muscle cells. And taking those cells and trying to make them or modify them genetically so that they are no longer allergenic. Okay, and so maybe some of you have heard of this term alpha-gal syndrome. It's a growing allergy in the US and worldwide population. If you've been bit by a tick, you are now sensitive to red meat, so you can't eat beef and other meats. And if you do, you can have severe or mild reactions depending on your exposure, right? And so here we're trying to elevate. We're going to make beef the same way the cow makes it, but in a controlled environment. But now we're going to have that beef to be healthy for you in ways that current livestock generated beef can't be. So we're clear on where this could elevate. Another example, and again, I'm saying these now because I probably won't get through all the slides. I never do. We took the cow cell as well. This is all work that's done already. And we imported into those cells the vitamin A pathway. Vitamin A is what you see in carrots, right? So the orange color. Why vitamin A? It's a wonderful antioxidant. That's why carrots are particularly good for you, along with your eyes, right? Beef cells, the muscle cells here, don't make vitamin A, right? And so the idea was very simple. If we could import vitamin A into beef cells and grow up those cells and make food, number one, the raw meat, in principle, would be much more stable, less oxidation, so healthier when you go and buy it and cook it. And number two, the reason we did it is for people with irritable bowel disease, where if we could somehow provide enhanced antioxidant activity in the food, you would have sort of a better time eating your food in a safer way. So again, elevating above what you could do otherwise, so people would want to try it and go from there. So you get the idea, hopefully. I don't want to belabor the point too much. Any questions about some of those points, just to make sure? Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
So I really appreciate the idea of incorporating vitamin A into feed, but in theory, could you technically incorporate even more nutrients, like even those cellulose from vegetables into beef products, so that you only need to eat technically one kind of fruit juice?
Oh, I love this man already. Yeah. In principle, there's no theory, no limit. I'm telling you the rosy part, right? Behind everything, there's other details that I'm not telling you. For example, when we put the vitamin A pathway in that beef cell, what happens to the beef cell? First of all, it looks a little bit orangey, which is pretty cool, actually, but it slows down the rate at which it grows. So you win on nutrition, but because the cell is putting energy into making this new stuff, the rate at which it doubles its numbers goes down. And so why is that a problem? You should say, Dave, what's the problem, right? And the problem is then it takes longer to grow enough cells to make a hamburger. And if it takes longer to make the hamburger, that means it takes more money. And that means you guys wouldn't buy it, right? So the answer is yes, you could do all those things, but you have to weigh that against the kind of total system. Yeah. So the options are limitless. And I will get to that sort of in concluding slide. Okay. So, all right, great. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions before I ramble on? Okay, so okay, why do we care? And I can tell you on this slide, everything there is relevant, and we have students from all parts of campus. It doesn't matter whether you're a philosophy major here, biology major, engineering major. Everyone's coming to the lab to study something on this kind of cycle of food life, if you will. So why do we care about cell ag? Why do other people care about this? Number one, we're facing, another 2 billion people in the next 20 to 30 years. We know already we can't feed those people. So how are we going to do it differently? Cellular agriculture is the only option I'm aware of. There are a lot of other things going on out there with new technologies. I've looked at them all. At least from my perspective, nothing is going to solve the problem the way this technology can. Food safety, security, public health. I could spend all day on this one, right? You see a recall every week of some beef or pork product. You saw this with COVID. All the pork processing plants shut down because they were a hot spot for transfer of viruses, et cetera. So the list goes on. Food security has become a hot topic for the world as well. I think you'd be amazed at how much meat and protein-rich foods the US imports compared to other countries. So you see huge public investments in this space in cellular agriculture in food insecure countries. Places like Singapore, places like Korea, Japan, places like Israel, places like Denmark, all investing huge amounts of resources to grow this technology because they see it as a way to become more food secure than they are today. So I think that's only the beginning. In the US, if I had to point out the biggest current barrier to seeing this field boom, it's the lack of public investment. The government has not yet started to look at this as the way they looked at electric vehicles or as computer chips. So we need that kind of billion-dollar commitment from the government to build kind of the infrastructure to let the companies grow the way they need to. That hopefully will come. I don't know whether it'll be 1 year or 10 years, but I think it'll eventually come. And then public health in general, I don't want to scare you with facts, but I'll scare you with facts, right? If you look at, in the US particularly, everyone talks about antibiotic-resistant organisms, and that causes health problems and concerns for all of us. If you're not aware, more than 80% of all the antibiotic use today is used just for industrial livestock growth, right? So tight, dense places where they grow cows and pigs and chickens, 80% is used just to keep them healthy enough to get the food on the plate for you guys to eat. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing because it works and we get good food, reasonably good food. But at the same time, we're creating other risks we don't need to take. And that's just the antibiotics. There's hormones used and lots of other things. And they all end up in our stomach. So keep that in mind as you think about these things too. Food equity, some of you are aware. I mean, some of our cities are food deserts. It's hard to get healthy, nutritious food there. This is a way to solve the problem. Cell ag is very modular and very scalable. Hello. And so the idea is if we do our job well, you could build these systems to be in a local community, to a large city, to almost anywhere. And the idea is to use resources that are locally accessible, so you save transportation costs and so on, and just change the whole paradigm. To be determined, but that's kind of the vision right now for this field. Environmental sustainability, we can't grow more beef and chickens. We just don't have the resources on the planet to do it. We're at a breaking point. I'll show you some data in a second. So we've got to think differently about how to more efficiently use what's available. That's why a lot of students, including my own daughter, loves this field, right? Because she's an environmental, studies major from Tufts, and this is what she cares about, right? And so I think there's a lot of sort of impetus here to drive future changes as well. And then if you care about animals, a lot of my students love animals. We always have animals at home. We do too. So thinking about, all the animals used to grow food, and can't we do this better? And I also believe, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people will look back at how we produced our meat and food and think we were, something was wrong with us. If you really dig into it, and I'm not trying to scare anybody or, everybody has their own views, that's great. But my point is there's a better way and a simpler way and a much more controlled way that's safer, healthier, and more nutritious going forward. We're not there yet. We have a lot of challenges. I'll show you those. So it's not all rosy, but I think we're on the right track. So let me stop for a second here. Any questions about sort of some of the unethical and ethical reasons we're talking about this today? Anybody have questions? No? Yeah, please.
Like, what do you think of the conservative pushback against this? Like that places are banning this kind of meat preemptively because like maybe it threatens like existing farming practices, like it's in competition with like current farming practices?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So if you're not aware of this, right? So so far, I think now 4 or 5 states have outright banned what I'm talking about today, meaning you can't sell it in your state. Now, I won't get into politics today. That's not my goal. But think about I will call it the craziness of that. There's not one product on the market today, and yet they're banning something, right? So what does that tell you? There's something behind that that has nothing to do with science and technology. This is perfectly safe. If you're not aware of these companies, there are now 3 approved for sale in the US, Upside Foods, Good Meat, and most recently Mission Barns, and I'll show you some images of their products, but they're not for sale yet, right? So there's nothing for sale, and yet people are banning it. And this is because of lobbies, particularly the livestock lobbies and so on. And so what do I say about it? It's just normal, any new technology creates polarization, I would say, on views, whether you're in the field, out of the field, and I think that's, in some ways, I want to turn that around and say it's actually healthy. It makes us make sure we're really, really careful about what we put out there. So for example, everything we do here at Tufts is published in the open peer-reviewed literature. We want everything out there transparent, let people make their own judgment. I'm not here to tell you to eat this stuff or not eat it. I want you to make your own choice. I told you about all these genetically modified cells before to make you healthier. That's up to you if you want to eat them. I'm not telling you you have to eat them. I just, we look at safety as part of the program and we publish all that. So my answer is I don't know how to answer that because it's so politically charged and not relevant to science. Anybody that tells you these foods are not safe doesn't know what they're talking about because these companies for these products have to go through both the FDA and the USDA to get approval. That's even more challenging than traditional foods. Just keep that in mind. So you can't argue they're not safe. So what else is there? It's business interests and so on. There are obviously fights going on in the courts regarding those bans because whether they're legal or not is the real question because you're supposed to have free trade among states. But there's 50 states, so there's plenty of states that can rock and roll in this technology and make products, and you'll see those coming forward. So, but thank you. Great point. Anyone else? Yeah, please.
Can you talk a little bit about the energy efficiency, like the life science?
Yeah.
Can you speak to reference field with sunlight, screen versus like power lab?
Yeah. Again, if time, I'll get to some slides. But the question for this field, like we talk about sustainability, how much more sustainable is it really, right? And the question is, no one knows. Okay, no one. And why? The reason no one knows is there's no large-scale production plant where you could collect real data to feed the models to tell you how better it is or not. So what we do, and we do it here at Tufts, this is with my colleagues at the Nutrition School, Nicole Blackstone, and others involved. And what they do is take the data that we and others generate at the laboratory level and try and extrapolate that for a larger scale. So there's some gray area there. But all those models, depending on the cell you're growing, the food you're making, always show you do better than what your current food production is, okay? But that's with a lot of caveats. It depends on what part of the equation you're looking at. So for example, electrical energy input to drive a plant, you've got to use solar and so on. Otherwise, you're going to lose there. But in terms of other aspects, you actually do pretty well. So the answer is yes, it's better, but it's going to vary how much better depending on many of the variables, okay? Thank you. And again, you're going to get me going on this because there's now, and we just published a review on this, right? There's like 8 peer-reviewed papers out there that argue cellular agriculture is never going to be sustainable. Literally in writing, okay? And of course, when they get published, all the news agencies call our lab and they say, Dave, what's going on here? And so if you look at every one of those papers, this doesn't come just from me, from Nicole and others, right? It's all based on extrapolation from pharmaceutical manufacturing. And pharmaceutical manufacturing is, as we talked about before, all the equations are different, right? You have to completely rethink everything. And so it drives me crazy because we spend a lot of time just getting the facts out there, but the public sees some of this and then they're all in like a tizzy about, you know, what are we doing? But the answer is there's no basis for saying we're not going to be better. We just don't know how much is what I'm getting at. Yes, please.
Correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe talk a little bit more about this, but given that something like this looks like it was going to involve a whole lot of like upfront capital investment to get off the ground relative to something like traditional agriculture, would this be something that would lead to more centralization, like ownership, things like that in the agricultural field, at least at first, maybe not in the long run?
Yeah, this is back to what I mentioned before, right? Absolutely, that's a fear or a concern, right? I think the ultimate goal here is to find the right balance. And I don't know how that's going to evolve. I'm not a business guy, but I think that's something we're all aware of and very, you know, conscious of as we make our arrangements and do our things. But you're right. The comment really is, well, how do we know this isn't going to go the same way as livestock manufacturing eventually, right? And it's just going to be 3 mega companies in the world, or 6, I think it is, truthfully, that control everything, right? So whatever price you're going to pay is because of what they decide. And the answer is, I can't be sure it's not. But what I do know is, like I said before, this is very modular. And we're working hard right now through Tufts to establish what I call a universal cell bank for the field. So any cell, like I mentioned, the beef cells, we want those to be available to anybody to use free of charge, other than shipping and, you know, the usual stuff. And so our goal is to make sure that there's equity in the sort of common things you need to drive the process. How it goes from there, I can't be sure. But it's tough for small companies. I'm sure you know this. You don't have the resources to build the infrastructure. You build the infrastructure, you're out of business. If you just do your core research, then you're out of business too, because you don't have the infrastructure. So that's why I said public funding is going to be essential, whether it's 1 year from now or 10 years from now, or it's the field's just going to be research level and slowly percolating. But I'm pretty confident. And since you got me started, sorry I go off on all these tangents. You've only got 3 slides in out of 40, but that's okay. What was I going to say? Now, where were we going with this?
Talking about
Shoot.
stratification, concentration of ownership.
Yeah, but I had a really good point, and now I clearly I didn't have enough coffee this morning. I'll think of it at some point, but thank you. All right. Anyway, okay. Anything else before I move on? No? Okay. All right. So this next 2 slides comes from your own Department of Agriculture. I didn't make this stuff up, right? And this is posted on their website or in their documents, right? They are already telling you we can't feed the population going forward. With all the investments they make, all the support for these livestock manufacturers that are banning stuff in states, there's no future, right? It doesn't mean we don't have a good system, but it's not equipped to grow further to feed the growing population. So what are we going to do? We got to think differently. And number 2, if you're not aware of this, almost 90% of the farmers today in the U.S. depend on second incomes, right? So the farming sort of ecosystem is not healthy to begin with, based on the Department of Agriculture approaches and so on. So we've got to do better is the point, right? We can't live by our past. We've got to look to the future and be innovative. And that's what, and sorry. So anyway, from the US Department of, I think I have a slide later, I skipped ahead. They talk about we need innovation, we need new things. And this is where cell ag becomes really, really important. And then some of you out there should be like, well, Dave, this is all a waste of your time. Why are you doing all this, right? Why don't you just tell people to eat less meat? And the answer is, they've tried this. Department of Agriculture has tried it, companies have tried it, and it never works, right? It doesn't work in the US, and it works even more poorly around the world. As countries grow in economic prosperity, they invariably want more meat in their diet. It goes with economic status and so on. It's the equation. It doesn't change. So you can put out all these consumer notices, red meat's unhealthy, don't cook it, you're going to get all kinds of carcinogens, no one cares, right? Everyone says, let's do it in moderation. But even in moderation is fine, but if the population's growing, the demand keeps going up. I think I have a number later on one of the slides. If you're not aware of how much meat is produced in the world yearly, meat and fish, it's almost up to 500 million tons per year. Think about that number. 500 million tons of meat. That's a lot of biomass, right? Yes.
I did have just one quick question. Are there any variables that you've been able to identify that do reliably decrease meat consumption while decoupling it from economic growth?
Not me. I would defer you to one of my colleagues again in the nutrition schools. Sean Cash works on those kinds of questions. He does consumer surveys, and maybe he has an answer. I'm not aware of one. You know, he's done surveys for the program, Cell Ag program, for example, asking if you're a vegetarian. Like, I don't know, I don't want to even know, but how many of you might be vegetarian? Let's say it's 10 of you in here, right? The question is, if you grow meat this way, right? So not livestock, but just the cells from the animal, would you eat it as a vegetarian or if you're vegan? And the answer is, it depends on the survey, and there's a mixed response, which is fine, right? Some will and some won't. You're not harming an animal, so that's the logic for some who would consume it. Some say it's still got an animal cell in there, I don't want it, okay? So there's no one answer today, that's my point. There's gonna be a continuum of thoughts, inputs, questions. I like that. That means you're always kind of thinking through what you're doing, making sure you're doing it the best that you can, and understanding we're not telling anyone really what they're going to eat. We're just saying, here are the options, and you know, you can decide. Anyway, great questions. Thank you. I'm going to skip this. You already know. I will tell you this. So cows are probably the most inefficient animal on the planet. Estimates are, well, you can see some of the numbers here. I don't have to tell, right? You have to give them almost 7 pounds of feed to get 1 pound of meat. It's just ludicrous. Now, chickens are much more efficient, right? So we show the worst case here. So chickens, I think, are 2 to 1. So they're pretty good. And chickens grow in 6 weeks. Cows take almost 2 years before you can butcher them for meat. And I'll get my take-home slide later, which is really hokey, but I have the slide that tells you not only about nutrition and flavor and all the things we can do with what we're talking about technology today, but think about it. It takes a cow 2 years. With a cell, we can engineer that cell in a day, and within a week, we have a new product, right? So the rate of change, the rate of impact will be just so better than what you get today. So many reasons for this. But anyway, beef is the classic example of what not to do. So why do we grow cows and chickens and pigs? What's the reason for that? People like them, but they were also the animals way back when that were the easiest to domesticate. They liked living with each other, right? Now they're over densified, but that was the early days, and we like them, of course. But we'll get to that as well. Thank you for saying that, right? So we're used to cow meat and chicken meat and turkey meat and so on if you eat meat, right? Why? We're limited, you know, those are very limited palates and sensory because those are the species you're used to eating for your entire life, right? For me, many decades, right? But if you follow what we're talking about today, you can take a cell from any animal on the planet. It doesn't matter, right? Even the elephant I mentioned, and grow up that food to try. So the point is your palate will become something you've never even thought of today. And I believe in 20, 30 years, you're going to be able to try foods you've never even thought to try, and you'll find new things you're going to enjoy. So again, the future, you know, stay tuned. I think there's going to be some amazing things, and we'll see. And even the elephant would be edible if you want, okay? Okay, so innovation is key. This comes from the Department of Agriculture, not me. So we need to revolutionize the way we produce our food, and we need to do it fast. Those are their words, your own government, okay? So you have 3 choices. Like I said, cell ag is the answer, but there are other things going on that will help. So one is plant-based meats. You already know about these. We'll talk about those. Another is just alternative proteins. So getting useful proteins for nutrition out of cells. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll spend whatever little time I'm left with, God, this is terrible, sorry, on cell ag itself. So plant-based meats, what do you guys know about plant-based meats? What do you see on every restaurant menu in Burger King today, everywhere? Any fast, Impossible Burger, right? So all the rage. 5 years ago, you never heard of Impossible Burgers, right? So what changed? right? Before 5 years ago, it was all bean burgers, things like that. And then 5 years ago, all of a sudden it's now everybody's trying it. So anybody know what the major technological innovation that happened for that company to skyrocket? Heme, good, heme. So heme, just like in your blood, hemoglobin, and it carries iron. And it turns out when you cook heme with iron, it has that meaty umami flavor. And so adding that into plant products makes you think you're eating meat, and people like it a lot better. So how many here have tried the Impossible Burger? How many have tried it more than once? How many have tried it more than 10 times? Okay, that's actually pretty good compared to what I normally see, okay? So that's a great sign. But there's a lot of blowback now. And the blowback is for at least 3 reasons. Cost is still a bit higher. Consumers don't want to pay more. Number 2, over-processing is always an issue. So and we'll talk about this, how do you make these and what does it mean? People want less over-processed foods today to be healthier again. And 3 is the ingredients. There are a lot of extenders, salts, and other things. And I always remember the day I brought these home, and my wife, who's more meticulous about what she eats than I am, and she looked at the package and she said, "Hey, honey, did you see what's on this package?" And I said, "No, I just thought it was good," right? And I looked at it and I said, "Oh my God, there's all this stuff in there," right? So they've gotten better and better, but there's still a long way to go. So most people, so if you watch those companies, Impossible and also Beyond Meat, okay, 5 years ago there were 0. They, exponential growth, huge market value, and now where are they? They're all tanking, and they're tanking because most consumers have not consistently stuck with them because they don't taste quite as good, they're still expensive, and they're worried about nutrition and health. Feel free to push back if you're like, you eat them every day and you love them, great, all power to you, but the general public does not feel that way, okay? And then alternative proteins. So an example is, for example, you could grow cow milk without cow proteins is the idea. So healthier in a sense that you could produce healthy proteins without needing sort of the animal in the process. So the question would be, why are those all in the middle of failing as well? Because they were skyrocketing and now they're all plummeting. Anybody know the reason? And it's different than the ones we talked about for the plants. One reason only.
US?
No, you can sell them. You can make them. They're beautiful proteins. Okay, it's cost. The cost. It's just way too expensive to produce these at a level that people are willing to buy today. So it has to come down in cost, and that hasn't happened yet. So those are the 3 things, and then of course cell ag is the panacea. Not really. It's got some issues we'll talk about, but I think in terms of the confluence of all these inputs and the opportunities, it is the kind of the home run, the holy grail, whatever your favorite term is. But you can disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. All right, so let's briefly walk through this. So plants, we talked about the Impossible Burger. How is it made? Take your favorite crop, shown corn here. Go from left to right. You chop up the corn in different ways. You can do it physically, enzymatically, et cetera. And then go through the middle thing, and this is the over-processing, this extrusion. Just like baking sausage, you turn the crank and out comes this gooey stuff. Out comes this plant mixture, but you have to add stuff to get it to flow through the extruder. And then out on the right side, you make your favorite materials. So does it work? Yes. Are there products out there? Yes. But for all the reasons we talked about, there's some limitations there, right? And this, Impossible Burgers out there, I don't know if they're still sold at KFC. You could buy plant-based chicken nuggets and so on. So there's lots of products you could try. And there's a couple that are actually pretty good. There's some, I've tried just about all of them. And there's some I do like, but I don't buy them regularly because they're just not quite there yet. And so this is the magic ingredient, as I call it, right? The heme that we already talked about that made this kind of had to take off, and then you could make the heme from non-animal sources, so it's still animal-free products. But lots of stuff in there and tons of sodium in there if you worry about blood pressure and so on. All right, and then one other example, mung bean protein. I always show this because this was an early protein extract from plants and makes eggs. You can buy this in Whole Foods. I don't know if anybody's tried it. It's actually not too bad. I kind of like it, but some people do and some people don't. But they're doing pretty well with this, I would say. All right, that's plants. Here is alternative proteins we talked about, right? So same idea, but now you don't want, your favorite plant here, right on the left. Here, you just want the gene that encodes something that something makes, right? And non-animal. So you take your favorite gene, so a piece of DNA encoding what protein you want. You pick your favorite host system, could be bacteria, yeast, depends on your favorite form. Go into a bioreactor, grow up a lot of it, and then extract the protein and then add it to the food you're gonna make. Does it work? It works beautifully, right? It's just too darn expensive to do it at the scale. Did you have a question or?
Existing input. What is the cell made of you're making?
Oh, so you mean like what are the products or no?
Is there a protein that goes in? It's not just.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about, yeah, of course, you need sugars and all that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Stay tuned on that one, yeah. I'm just getting off on too many tangents. So here's an example. Perfect Day makes animal-free milk, right? So they make casein proteins by the method I just talked about. So you could buy this milk and it's protein-free. Why do I show you Perfect Day when there's all these companies out there? Because Perfect Day was co-founded by one of my former students. He's now no longer involved after 10 years because they're starting to tank because the cost is too high, right? But really nice product. They make ice creams and all kinds of yogurts and things like this. So my point now, we're going to move into cell ag. But my point is you already eat stuff or drink stuff or cook stuff that really is not that different in some ways, if you think more kind of universally about this, right? So if you eat cheese that's full of alt proteins already, you know, the enzymes used to get cheese to where you want it. Bread is full of active yeast when you grow it to get the, you know, the porous structure and so on. And beer obviously is from organisms as well. So we're kind of used to consuming organisms. We just don't really think about it that way. And I was going to put some slides together. I didn't, but you know, even if you're a meat eater, which is great, and you have a hamburger, I did some estimates of how many animal cells are in a hamburger, right? And it's like billions of cells in a single hamburger, right? Because the animal tissue you're consuming is still made of cells. It's no different than what we're going to talk about with cell ag. So my point is, some consumers are afraid of what I'm talking about. There's no reason to be. I would say that we talked about earlier. It's perfectly safe. And number two, you're already consuming these things, right? So in different ways. But anyway, so this is what we're talking about for cell ag. Again, we went through the slide before, but left to right, same idea. All the things we've mentioned. So what does this stuff actually taste like? So we're fortunate as a group here at Tufts. We've been all around the world and tasted every product just about that's out there. And most of these are not yet commercial. They're available when you go to the companies that are making them. You could sample them there. We've actually done some taste testings here in Boston where the companies bring the product in. And so you're allowed to do this on a limited scale. You just can't do it on a large scale yet. So we've had cultivated salmon fillets from Wild Type in San Francisco. If I didn't tell you it wasn't the real salmon, you would not know the difference. It's a little bit softer, but in terms of color, texture, color and flavor, it's really, really good. Cultivated chicken from Good Meat, you can see it in the middle there, perfectly fine. The most recent approval for selling commercially in the US is the one on the right, Mission Barns. They grow pig fat cells, right? And then they use those fat cells in bacon and meatballs, things like that, because fat is where all the flavor is, right? So they'd use 10% cell and 90% plant. So start to think about hybrid products, get you a lot, right? It gets you lower costs because the plants are cheap, the cells are expensive. You still get flavor, taste, and nutrition from the cells, and the plants give you texture. So it's kind of the best of all worlds if you could do it well and do it without over processing. And then you can see like they are selling, Mission Barns is going to start to scale up now that they have approval in the US, cultivated bacon, real pork without the pig. That's their catch line, right? So that's where this is going. There are their meatballs, Sci-Fi Foods. They made cow burgers, out of muscle cells. The good news is when we visited them 2 years ago, they were thriving. The bad news is they're now out of business, right? Like a lot of the startups these days, just because of the economic climate right now. The good news is though, hopefully the work they did and the cells they made will still be available to people. So there's still some positive, but it's a good example of the challenge, right? I don't know the exact numbers, nor do I want to, but they spent at least $500,000 just to engineer their cells to get them ready. And then there was not enough left to keep going, right? So this is the challenge today. Again, my plea for public money, if you will. Wild type we talked about. And then just other things you eat today, if you're not aware of it, the Better Meat Company makes fungal biomass. So this is fungus called Neurospora. But you find it in foods. You've probably eaten tempeh and others and different beverages. They actually sell to the big meat manufacturers today. And if you buy chicken nuggets from some of these, if you look carefully, some of those brands and versions have 10% of this product in there already. So people are already consuming fungal biomass as a cell-based component in some foods. We've been to their company. This stuff is amazing, tastes really good. They make all sorts of cold cuts out of it at the top right that are really good as well.
That's supposed to be like chicken?
It's supposed to be exactly like chicken, exactly. The texture is pretty amazing and very simple production process as well. And then the other one to keep in mind is there are actually commercial available supplies, particularly in Singapore. I mentioned, food insecure countries. So they're already selling stuff. You can see, if I could point to it up here, Good Meats makes chicken nuggets that they sell in any supermarket in Singapore. But don't be fooled, right? This is great because it gets it out there, but it's only 3% sell in 97% plant. So it's a bit of a marketing ploy, I would say. I'm not that happy with it because I think it misleads people that this is real healthy and so on yet for you, but it's a start, right? At least something's getting out there. But, the question will be, how much cell do you need to make this better for you? And the answer is no one has that answer yet today because it has to be scaled and so on. But my guess is it'll be somewhere between 10% and 50% to do this well. Upside Foods in California uses at least 50% or more cells in their chicken products as well. They taste great. I've had those. So, stay tuned on all that. You'll see different versions moving ahead. We said we had approvals in the US, which is great. And this is the origin. My God, what did I do here? Okay, so we're going to skip all this for time. So somebody asked the question, I think it was you asked the question. So this is where it all comes together, right? So when I look at cellular agriculture, it's the confluence of all the things we've been talking about, right? So if you follow on the top there, top left, the food, the animals, you get the cells we talked about, those go into the bioreactor. But to feed the cells, which is, I think, your question, you need all this stuff here at the bottom, right? You need extracts from plants, microbes, et cetera, for the media ingredients, animal-free, to go into the bioreactor for the energy sources for those cells, assuming that's what you asked. That includes vitamins, it includes amino acids, things that cost money and so on. But the idea is to get them all from plants and microbes. And then you need additives again here with the cells that come out of the bioreactor to make unstructured meats, like chicken nuggets and sausages, and then you need different kinds of scaffolding from plants and so on to make structured meats. So alternative proteins we talked about, those are products from microorganisms, but they're just the products, not the cells. The plants are just the plant's materials. Cell ag is what brings the cells as the key ingredients. That's where, again, nutrition, flavor, taste comes from. That's why it's so important in this process. Okay, big picture, good? Yes? All right, so I have failed you miserably because I had all this great stuff. Let me think. We have 10 minutes. Okay, let me skip to a couple of things because I do want to balance my enthusiasm with reality. So you see on this slide all of the challenges ahead, right? The only one we've really focused on is the lack of infrastructure to scale from public funding. But we're still working hard on reducing costs. I'll show you real quickly some things there. We're developing, and this is all stuff we're doing at Tufts, just to be clear, okay? And with our consortium of schools. We're working on, I'll call it novelty on how to scale this up. So moving away from pharmaceutical manufacturing and moving into the world of food means you have to rethink everything. So it's a great opportunity for our students to innovate, and we've made some good progress there. I'll show you again, real quick, one example. How do you make dense foods? For those of you who grow cells for anything, cells like some space to get oxygen and nutrients back and forth. So you should put them in a dense structure. You don't get oxygen and nutrients back and forth and the cells die. So how do you overcome that? So we're working on ways to do that. safety, safety, safety always, quality, taste, et cetera, and then GMO or not GMO. So genetically modified or not. Again, we work on both versions here to let others decide. That's the goal. Yeah, please.
One of the challenges that isn't on this slide, but I think it's something that's out in the world, is the consumer acceptance of engineered foods, lab created foods. How do you think about that?
So we think about it all the time. That's where this comes in, okay? So we do surveys. Again, I mentioned the nutrition school does the surveys. I would say we have a very large USDA funded program on this that started 4 years ago. When we started that, consumer perceptions were like number 8 on a list of 8 things. Now, when we do all our grants and write it out, it's number 1. So it drives everything today because you could invest a lot of time and money in the wrong thing, right? And so the idea is
Sci-fi foods.
Yeah.
I think I have a hypothesis on this that consumers don't really want sci-fi foods.
that may be. So, but you're absolutely right. You have to think about these things up front. And so we are doing that. And again, Sean would be the best person to talk to on that as well. Thank you for that. Yeah. So anyway, these are the challenges. So everything I show on this slide, there's active research going on. So in 2 minutes, I'll show you a couple of quick examples. I'm just skipping all the cool stuff. I apologize. See if I can find. So I show this because we're very proud of this. I guess I shouldn't boast for the group, but I will. It's the students' work, not mine, right? But we started, before 2020, the cost to grow these cells was out of the, planetary cycle, right? You're talking $200 per liter almost to grow these because I came from the pharmaceutical world. And yet just in our lab in 4 years, we've gone down to less than $10 a liter now to grow the cells. So orders of magnitude improvement. And there's some companies out there that claim they're now below $1 a liter. So my point is costs are becoming a non-issue, which is a great thing. It's just the other things that still need to be addressed. And I put it into this context. This whole field started about 11, 12 years ago, if you're not aware. It started with a demonstration in London by a good friend of mine, Mark Post. He was a cardiac surgeon in the Netherlands at the University of Maastricht. And Mark grew muscle cells from cow in the lab, carried it over to the UK because he couldn't do the public consumption in Europe. So he went to the UK. They allowed him to do it on live television. He brought it all there. He cooked the hamburger. They had chefs cook it, and the chefs ate it, and they commented about it. It was very hokey, very PR. Mark's a little bit too PR for my likes, but that's okay. He got the field started by doing that. And the point was, people said, oh, you could actually make food by growing cells like this. So that's where the field started. So that was a good thing. If you look at the details, though, this hamburger cost $1 million, okay? That's reality, right? And it was still full of animal-derived products as well. So it was a bit, again, smoke and mirrors, but it did get the field going. And I showed you from our own lab how much costs have come down, right? And that's happening everywhere. So again, I don't think it's cost, it's the scale-up infrastructure. Yeah.
So, the perspective on how cell culture is evolving global. Like, is it mostly in the United States, or I'm guessing in Europe as well, but.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. Europe, China, Singapore, US is, of course. Yeah. No, everywhere. And, if I look back, I didn't bring these slides, but like if you look back at how many publications in this space 10 years ago, it was like you could barely find a blip on a screen of a Google Scholar search. Now it's just, it's growing exponentially.
Is it being developed in like youth camps?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's places, and maybe I'd shout out to the nonprofits out there. So there's 2 nonprofits that really catalyze the field. The earliest one was New Harvest, if you've never heard from them. And that's the only reason we got started, because 3 of my early PhD students who wanted to work in this space were funded by their graduate scholarships. Otherwise, I didn't have money. There was no money for this, right? So they started things, and now what's called the GFI, Good Food Institute, is really a worldwide organization. Get to know them, look on their website. They are truly amazing people-wise and technology thoughtfulness. And they have their pulse on everything, what's going on everywhere in the world. And they're the ones who partnered with the Bezos Earth Fund to start to fund large $30 million centers in alt protein cell ag space. So there's one now in London at Imperial College, one at North Carolina State University in the US, and one just opened in Singapore. And we collaborate with all of them, just to be clear. So there's momentum, but you still need public support is what I'm saying. And let me just close with, I got to get to my hokey slide. Sorry for this. I was going to use this cool. So for scaling up, the way we're doing it is textile engineering. Okay, and I won't get into the details, but we're looking at how to get away from all the mass transfer issues and so on. So this is one of the future areas we're working on, among many others. But let me get to, we do smell testing here with all the foods. We can compare, the actual biochemical composition of our cell-grown fat with real pig fat and show they're indistinguishable, which is pretty cool. That means outside of the animal, the cells have the right flavor and so on. So that's a good thing. And then this is my hokey slide, so apologies for my hokiness. So I was trying to make the point here, right? If you feed a cow, you're sort of forced to be limited by the cow's metabolic profile, right? The cow is going to consume stuff, chew it up, digest it, and make its own meat. And you have the microbiome in the cow, right, to help with that process. But you're still, no matter what you feed the cow, there are limits to how much you can change the composition of that meat, right? So no matter what you do. And number two, on top of that, which we did talk about, it's going to take you 2 years to see if you can get a cow to be different. And that's just by breeding the old-fashioned way. On the right-hand side, that's supposed to be a bioreactor, right? You can do those changes every day, literally in hours to days, and make the changes we're talking about. So again, it opens up incredibly fast changes towards that nutritional enhancement and so on that I talked about. So we have examples for our own work, mostly published, some just coming. I don't have time to go through them, where we can change the smell of the food you grow by the technology we're talking about today, which is profound, right? If you think about how much you could change it. We changed the nutritional composition. We talked about some examples already. And ultimately, the health benefits will be unparalleled. We're not there completely yet, but that's where we're going. Okay, I think we'll just leave it at that. I have to find that was my carrot. Like I said, you could even grow elephant meat, right? Sorry, this is the Tufts program. And I just want to close with our catalysts in the lab, all the students, undergrad, grad, all campuses. Every campus at Tufts is represented in what we do in this field, because you need everybody, whether it's the consumer surveys, whether it's the fatty acid analysis we do in the chemistry department, whether it's growing certain cells in the biology department, all the engineering we're talking about, going out to the vet school for the biopsies, the medical school to look at the gut and healthy issues with the intestine and so on, all part of the process. So let me stop there, and I'd love to answer more questions, and I'm happy to stay longer for whoever has questions. But thank you for listening through this. Yeah. Oh.
I know you mentioned the perfect day, the example, but I would love to hear a little bit more about where dairy and egg production and farming comes into play with all of this. I think I can see on one hand how this big mills would love the reduction of reliance on animal usage, but maybe there, I don't know, could you tell me more about how you can use the technology for that in that case?
Yeah, maybe I'll give you a specific example. There's been about a half a dozen companies trying to make alternative proteins and fats that represent, for example, mother's milk, right? So you could buy mother's milk instead of other forms of milk to feed a child, but animal-free. The idea is to have animal-free sources for an infant as they're growing. And I think all of them are either out of business or about out of business, including the one that was in North Carolina that I knew very well called BioMilk. And so the reason is simply it's not easy to do. First, you have to get the right epithelial cells from the animal or from the human you're going to use. You have to get them to grow and want to grow in large quantities, not trivial. You have to figure out hormone cycling and feeding those cells to get them to do what they do in vivo, but ex vivo outside of the animal. And then you have to figure out how to do cost-effective harvesting, purification, safety testing, and then you get to scale up. And there's just not enough resources to support these startups to make a go of it. The technology, for everything I talked about today, I can tell you the technology is there to do all these things. It's not a lack of the right science and the technology. We do need some optimization and all that. I understand that. The challenge is the cost to get to that production level that we can't manage yet. So that's why the field is very, very slow right now. And it'll be slow till we see more public investment. But the science is there, the technology is there, and the opportunity to change the way we're dealing with our nutrition and health is there. I just think we've got to figure out how to get it done in the US. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind by Singapore, Israel, Denmark, and so on, because that's where the investments are right now. Thank you for the question, though. Yeah. Yeah, please. And please, if you need to leave, you don't need to wait on ceremony. I'm fine if you leave.
All right.
Yeah, so I may miss the beginning, but this was said to be animal-free.
Yes.
But you need to extract the cell from animal somehow, right? So
Yes.
how was it done?
Yeah, we went all through that. That's all biopsy. And then the animal's out of the equation after that.
Oh.
Yeah. So you need the cell from the animal. After that, you don't need anything. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, please.
How does like the process of learning involved in this kind of food manufacturing? Because if you want to make chicken, there's so many different parts of chicken. If you just take like a single biopsy from the chicken, I'm just wondering how this different redifferentiation process is going for this kind of.
So again, the question, I'll just broaden it out. Every biopsy you take is different, right? Because it's a different muscle or a different fat or a different age of an animal or different sex of an animal, different disease state of an animal. So you have to be vigilant about characterizing your cells. You have to figure out not just can you get a cell, get it to work, but can you get it to work if you grow it, for 300 days? And then will it still work well if I take it and store it at -80 for a year and then take it back out? Will it still do the same thing? So all that is part of the program, all work in progress. And we monitor those things all the time. And yes, they will be different depending on the muscle source and so on. So lots of variables to worry about. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, please.
I'm sure it was in the juicy slide. But could you talk a little bit more about advanced proteins? The cell agriculture, I know, like even in breweries, mostly water with few cells. Could you talk a little bit about the scaffolds and how those are used to affect or what products are used as scaffolds?
Yeah, for sure. And I skimmed over it really quick. But if you think about the challenge, you just hit the nail on the head. Cells love to be in a dilute solution, right? To grow cells to large, high densities, so you bring the cost down, you have to get them to be in suspension culture. They can't grow on a surface. You just can't get the density up. So that's the first challenge. How do you get cells to do that? And so we said, well, let's forget all that. Let's do something completely different. And so what we do, for example, let's take a single fiber. That's all we need. And as long as that fiber is edible and nutritious, we can get the cells to coat and grow on the surface, right? It's a nice round surface. So now you have a edible fiber with cells, coating it completely. After that, it goes into traditional textile engineering, right? And so if you think about taking 100 of those and twisting them, you have your dense meat, right? And the cells don't even have to be alive because when you buy meat in the store, the cells are not alive. And so the idea is once we coat them, and so it's a very simple step. There's no what we call mass transfer limitation, right? Because you're not in a big vat where you need to cool and heat and mix. All that goes away. So we'll see what happens, but we haven't scaled that. But I'm just saying as a out-of-the-box way to think about that. That's one of a number of strategies the group is using to change the way people are thinking about future scaling. And I like it because you can make, these can be modular, as I said early on, right? They can be tiny boxes, big boxes. All you need is the cells and you could drive the rest. So there's a lot of issues within all that, but that's kind of the example, if that helps. Okay, yeah? Yeah, please, thanks. Anything else? Otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. Enjoy the rest of the time, right? Okay, thanks.